An important part of business sustainment and continued operations is to put together business continuity plans. Business continuity plans can help a business survive some type of disaster or interruption to its services. We see a field here often called business continuity management, which sort of includes three different disciplines: business continuity, disaster recovery planning, and of course, incident response planning. The purpose of business continuity and disaster recovery is to enable the organization to continue to provide critical services in the event of a disruption, and to be able to survive a disastrous interruption to activities. It's important here to realize that in business continuity planning, we are realistic. We realize that in most cases, we cannot recover everything, nor do we even want to recover everything. There are certain departments that probably are not going to be a priority. In my own case, when I was working in internal audit, the director of audit asked me, he says, "Could you update our business continuity plan? We haven't updated it since we moved buildings a year and a half ago." So obviously the plan is out of date. So a few days later, I put a stack of papers on his desk, and he said, "Oh, what's this?" I said, "It's your business continuity plan." He says, "Already?" He says, "I didn't think you'd have that done this quickly." I said, "Dave," I said, "we're the internal audit department. We're not a critical business function, and most of the business, in fact, believes they would run better without us." So, in other words, a business continuity plan for internal audit is, well, to be a little superficial. It's basically make sure everybody's safe, help out where you're needed. We're not going to be a priority for recovery of services. No, instead, we want to ensure as auditors that the parts of the business that are critical have then been addressed in business continuity and disaster recovery plans. So what is the difference between incident management then and business continuity? An event is any measurable occurrence. For example, somebody logged in, somebody logged out. Whereas an incident is an occurrence, an event that has the potential to disrupt business operations. So if you look at incidents, for example, we could say that it's an adverse event with that potential to disrupt mission business or mission or goals. In most cases, incident management is just a standalone practice. Most of the incidents can be addressed within an acceptable amount of time without needing to invoke a business continuity plan. If we have a minor incident, we fix it up. We don't need to revert then to business continuity planning. Business continuity planning is really only used when the length of the outage would expand beyond what the business could sustain. We write incident response plans to deal with all different types of incidents. Anything from a fire to a virus, of course, to a equipment outage, to a cut cable, to, in some cases, even employee malfeasance, or where an employee has done something wrong. So we have many different types of incident management, and when we look at incident management, we have teams then that are able to deal with the various types of incidents that we face. However, if we have an incident that would render critical business processes inoperable for an unacceptable length of time, that is where we need a business continuity plan. So we have a plan that'll kick in as soon as we know that we need to do some alternate process. We can't just recover from the incident. No, this is going to be an extended outage, and therefore we need to move to the next step of business continuity planning. So in most cases, business continuity planning is going to then require some type of either alternate location, if, say, for example, we had a fire, or alternate processes. Alternate processes, some other way of keeping the business going, which could be at another location, could be, of course, a manual process. It could be that we actually even outsource certain functions. Many organizations today, if they have a major incident and they need to invoke their business continuity plan, they're going to instead outsource functions such as, say, payroll, something that's very easy to actually pass that off to another organization, so that the affected organization is going to be able to focus on its key and critical business functions. So the idea here, of course, is that we need to focus on that which is going to have the most impact on the business. Impact on reputation, impact on financial, impact on regulations, where there may be laws that say we have to provide certain services. I came out of the telephone industry, and our requirement was that we had to keep the phone system running even if we didn't have commercial power. That meant we had to build in that level of resilience, that could keep running, and the fact that the power utility couldn't provide power was not an acceptable excuse that we couldn't keep providing service. So one of the things we'll immediately do is take a look at what type of incidents are they. We can say a classification of incidents starts where we try to determine, is this really a critical crisis event? Or is this something which is major, something which is minor, or even of negligible impact? We can say in a situation, a crisis would be something that could jeopardize the very existence of the business. Major financial harm, loss of life, things like this would usually be classified as a critical or a crisis. A major event is something that could have significant financial harm, and depending on the size of our business determines what significant is. To people like you and I, losing $100 is significant. To most companies, losing $10,000 is, well, an annoyance. So we have to determine what these classifications are for our organization. What is a major event? And quite often, that would look at either something such as financial impact, serious reputational impact, or we could say serious injury to a person. A minor event is something that would have a lower type of, should we say, financial impact, or maybe just a minor injury to a person. Something that would get us in the newspaper, but is probably not going to jeopardize our very existence as a company. And negligible, something that just happens as part of one of the things that happens on an almost a regular basis, shall we say. Very low level of impact, no injury to a person. Someone who spills their coffee on their keyboard, that's a negligible event. It's certainly an incident for the person who has just destroyed their keyboard, but as from the company perspective, it's of a negligible harm. Now, we understand what's important when we do classifications is we have to agree on the terms our organization will use. And we can use whatever terms we want, but we have to define what those terms mean. What does that term mean, say, major in our company? And that should be used then consistently. So a major event in one department would have the same weighting as a major event in another department, for example, so we can compare them together. There's many things that can cause an interruption to the business today. Things like obviously natural disasters, the volcanoes, the floods, the earthquakes, these sorts of things. That is certainly something that in many cases is going to interrupt our business for an extended period of time. Now, the question comes, if we have a major natural disaster, what is our company's desire to recover? Some companies will not write a plan. They quite simply say, if we have a major earthquake, we're going to be too busy worrying about family and friends to really worry about even rebuilding our business. For some companies, they don't bother writing a plan for a major event. Something that happens like that, well, it's probably just the excuse we've been looking for to shut the business down. On the other hand, we could have something like equipment failure. And here we should have plans. What happens if that server dies? What happens if that router doesn't work or a power supply fails? We should be ready, of course, for the various types of equipment failure we could have. We build in fault-tolerant systems, we build in resilience, the ability to fail over, or in some cases we can put in things like obviously spare parts and so on. People are often called our most valuable resource, but we understand that someday we will have another pandemic. And, for example, we can go back in history, obviously, to the Black Death, the bubonic plague, which wiped out a third of the population of Europe. We've had, of course, the 1919 Spanish flu, Hong Kong flu of the late 60s, we can expect someday we will have another major pandemic, and that could very much disrupt our business. It could mean that employees cannot travel. It could well mean, in some cases, we're worried that it could lead to the breakdown in social order. What happens if you have a lot of people demanding medical attention and the government services quite simply can't handle that? We could easily end up with, of course, a civil unrest. Is our company ready for these types of events? Have we considered what are the options we could do? What would we do for our employees who are out of town if we had a major crisis, for example, and people couldn't travel? So we have to do risk assessment. And risk assessment is we understand what are the sorts of things that could impact our business so that we are ready for them. We also have, of course, unavailability or loss of personnel. Now, this could be because of illness. It could be because, of course, even where a competitor starts up. We know that in some cases, a competitor may intentionally try to poach some of our best employees, ones that, they can open up a new office and believe that the best place to get the trained staff they need is from our staff. Are we ready for that? Do we have a plan in place of succession planning, employee retention? And so we have to look at what could happen. There's, of course, the inevitable problem of fire, where I've lost a facility, for example, or even these days, a lot of the world is running on just-in-time, should we say, inventory. We have heavy reliance on supply chain and materials coming in often just as they're required. Well, what happens if we have a supply chain disruption? Whether or not it's a sort of situation where we have a strike affecting then the offloading of ships, or some type of disaster such as the volcano out of Iceland that grounds air flights and some of our material and personnel can't get to a location. These are the sorts of things we have to consider. We have to be good at threat modeling, understanding all of the threats we may face. So, as auditors, we're not expected to be business continuity planning professionals, but we are definitely expected to be able to audit and provide assurance to management that all of the money they've put into business continuity planning is working. That means we need to understand the process. And the first steps, really, in setting up a business continuity planning, or we often say a business continuity management system, is to identify what business processes are of strategic importance. This is where we have to talk to senior management. We have to find out from senior management, in many cases, what their priorities are. We can say that this also is a strategic view, because it could be that some of the businesses we have today we think is an important business. But senior management already is looking ahead and saying, if we had a disruption, that's not our core business. That's not our future. And we would actually write plans for other parts of the business that senior management believes are the real priority for recovery. So this means we have to think strategically. What are the business processes that will have the greatest impact on us financially, legally, in many cases reputationally? What are the things that are important for us as an organization to be able to provide assurance to, not only our customers, but also, obviously, one of the problems here is that we have to provide assurance then to our stakeholders. The shareholders, for example, our financial organizations such as the banks, because if we are going to operate, we need that financial backing. And so what is strategically important? Now, one of the problems is that when we do business continuity planning, you'll find that several departments are not really enthusiastic. Those departments and the management in those departments is incredibly busy just trying to keep their head above water and keep the business processes running. They don't have time to talk about, what would happen if we had a crisis. No, they're dealing with a crisis every day of trying to keep their department operational. This is why it is so critically important that we have active management support. Very often, this will come by senior management actually writing a charter, a engagement letter that says we have, as a business continuity planning team, the right to go into departments, to request information, to request assistance, so that it's clear that senior management supports and is interested in ensuring this project works, rather than it end up continuously being delayed because people just don't have time for it.